Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, I've been wanting to say that every single session we've done thus far. So we are at our fourth and final mini workshop. Thank you guys so much for taking a few minutes out of your Friday to learn about some Mailchimp tips with us. I'm Christy. I'm one of the partners here at Campfire, and I will be leading our workshop today. And I've also got Lauren, one of our co-founders.
Hey, everyone.
Answer questions in our chat, and she will also help us walk through Q&A at the end of our conversations. I think Lauren just said it in the chat, but we would love to have you introduce yourself, maybe add a link to your social, or even sign up to your newsletter if you have one, so we can kind of follow along each other's journeys. But either way, we just want to say thanks so much for joining us, and we are excited to have you here. Okay, so Lauren, I'm going to ask if you want to turn off your camera real quick, and then we will dive into our content here. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger. Let's go. Before we get into the meat of our Mailchimp conversation, I wanted to just briefly introduce who Campfire is for those of you who might not be as familiar. Campfire is a design studio that specializes in brand strategy, graphic identities, websites, and interior design for creative businesses. We are in our 8th year of business and proudly headquartered here in Richmond, typically in the Fan District, but working safely from the comfort of our homes currently. We have a team of 6 designers and strategists across multiple disciplines who work on a variety of design projects, big and small, for clients across Virginia and even beyond. We are a hyper-collaborative team and really missing sitting next to each other lately. You'll see if you follow us on social media, but we've been trying to institute some new different ways to make sure that we stay connected while working from home. So check out some of that and maybe comment. Let us know what you guys have been doing to stay connected with your team. Even if you're not super familiar with Campfire, if you live in Richmond, you may have interacted with one of our projects before. Maybe you've sipped a beer at Cannon and Draw Brewery, or picked up a fresh smoothie from North End Juice, or maybe you've had the chance to make dinner reservations in the past through Richmond Restaurant Week's website, or perhaps you've recently donated to the Holly Fund. Campfire has had the pleasure of helping shape all of these creative brands, among many more. So now that you know a little bit more about us, let's get into this workshop. Today, we are talking email newsletters. Still one of the only ways to get your message directly into your audience inboxes, the newsletter really has this luxury of being unencumbered by algorithms or SEO restrictions, which means you have a ton of opportunity to create something really unique to you and to your brand. So how can you get started? You guys knew it. If you've been here before or seen any of our workshops, we are always going to start with some goals. I promise you, it is one of the best ways to get started with any task. Email newsletters are the same thing. Let's break it down. First up, what do you want your newsletter to accomplish? You could want to showcase or share content you've already created, blog posts, videos, anything like that. Maybe you want your clients to get to know you a little bit more, share a little bit behind the scenes, peeks into your process, or just personal stories and recommendations. Or perhaps you just want to use your newsletter to highlight a bit more about your brand personality, or to stay on top of mind for current clients. I think probably all of these are going to be some of your sort of desired accomplishments of the newsletter, but definitely you want to hone in on at least one or two. Deciding what you want your newsletter to accomplish will have a big impact on what it needs to look like and what action it needs to encourage. Additionally, once you answer some of these questions, it will help, or once you answer some of your goals, it will help you answer other questions like, what frequency do you want to send that newsletter? Weekly, monthly, quarterly? Consider your bandwidth, but also consider your goals. If you have a new product that launches every month, you're going to need a newsletter every month to support that. What types of content or topics will you share in your newsletter? Maybe that's going to come directly from your content plan, like we talked about last time in terms of your blog or other content you create, or maybe your newsletter is something totally different and you have a specific topic that you feature just in that newsletter. Does the newsletter need a name? It doesn't have to, but sometimes it should. If it's really focused in a specific area or theme, or if you send more than one. Recently, I noticed one of the newsletters I'm on, All Snap, she's a local leather goods brand. One of the newsletters I'm on for her is called Friends and Family. So it makes me feel like, oh, this is a special one. I'm going to get really unique, interesting content here that maybe I wouldn't get somewhere else. Lastly, how will you measure success? Are you going to measure that based on the percentage of opens you get for your email, on the number of sales or leads that come from it, number of people that just reply to it? These are all ways that you can measure success. If you're using Mailchimp specifically, you have a ton of opportunity to dive into the analytics. I would just consider what versions of those analytics really matter to you and how will you measure something being successful at the end of the day. Okay, you've got some goals, you've got a frequency in mind, and some success metrics. Now it is time to make your newsletter engaging. Let's talk about some ways to do that. Less is more, right? So there are a few ways to accomplish this, but the basic principle is the same. When we overwhelm people, they stop paying attention. So we want to think about how we can use principles of simplicity to make our newsletters easy to digest so that people want to keep reading and want to keep clicking. On the left side here, I love a simple one call to action newsletter. FrameBridge is a custom online framing company. They sent out this one recently with these sort of coloring sheets for download. It's got one heading, a short paragraph, one image, and one button. I love this. I know exactly what they want me to do, and I know how to do it. Super simple. I can read it, decide if it's for me, and move on. On the right side, this is Big Spoon's newsletter from Kevin Clay, locally. While he has multiple things going on, the general information here is all around one central theme, which are these video sessions he's doing with local food brands. So you can very easily see there's kind of short descriptions of each one photo that showcases who he's going to talk to, and then one button for you to sign up for each one of those. I love that his subject line also tells me the most important message, that there's a live session tomorrow, and then the actual content sort of expands on that. Again, just sort of a different version of using that less is more principle. Next up, your newsletter should provide some value, right? We want to be more than just selling to our customers or our audience when we're sending them a newsletter. It's bigger than just an ad. Your audience will learn that there's valuable content inside your newsletter if you do that, and they will continue to open them. So think about what resources you can share surrounding your product or service. This can be unique content to your newsletter, or you can pull from previously created resources. For Campfire's newsletter, we often pull from our blog, but you can see here that both Startup Virginia and Blanchard's have created custom resources that are sort of unique to their newsletter. Startup Virginia does this great little local event section in all of their newsletters. I love this because it just gives me a little roundup of other cool stuff happening that I probably wouldn't take the time to go find on my own. Full disclosure, they might have a little bit more text here than they need, but honestly, the value of this content overrides my interest in it being a little bit more skimmable. So I continue to open up and read this newsletter on the regular. Blanchard's also does a great job of their email content. I love checking out what they're doing. Their images are beautiful. Their content is short and easy to read. And there's also always something kind of interesting and coffee nerdish in there for me to get into. But recently I got this one that had playlist included, and I was so excited. This was such a great way of taking something that they already do, which is create great music content inside of their store, and they took it and they packaged it up into a Spotify playlist so I could engage with that information on my own at home. So I get to drink my Blanchard's coffee and listen to my Blanchard's playlist and pretend like I'm in the store. I think it was a great way of taking some previously created stuff and making it accessible through email. If you do need to just send an ad, I would encourage you to think about what other value you can provide in addition to that. Is there an easy promo code you can offer your newsletter subscribers? Maybe a flash sale that's special to only people who subscribe? Sending only ads with no value is really a surefire way to get people to unsubscribe. So make sure you consider what value is coming along with an opportunity to ask people for something. Finally, your newsletter is a great place to showcase your brand personality. I love reading the Chutzpah newsletter. Chutzpah is a design team. It's 2 women based out of LA. And one of the reasons I love reading it, not just because I think they're great designers, but because they have this fantastic brand voice. They are so casual and funny in their tone. There's always tons of valuable content, but honestly, the tone of voice is the thing that keeps me opening it and reading it every time I get it, because there's always something funny in there that makes me laugh or makes me think, wow, these people are awesome. And so it gets me opening it every time. On the right side, I've got one of my other favorite newsletters from the podcast Reply All. A podcast is a really personal communication channel anyways, but they've done a great job of using the newsletter to add another layer of personality to their communication. So they have included this sort of personal recommendation list. So each one of these buckets of content here, below they're introducing the new podcast, they have different people on their team recommend some type of entertainment. They sent this before quarantine, but especially now, I'm loving it for these great recommendations that are movies and TV and music and all kinds of stuff. It's not only valuable, but it's really personal. And I think that's a great win-win for an awesome, engaging newsletter. Okay, so you've got some engaging content that's easy to digest, provides value, and shows your personality. Now it's time to layer in some action. The action that you're going to seek depends a lot on your goals from the first step. And typically that action is going to take place somewhere outside of the actual email, right? So we need to use buttons and links to let our audience know exactly what we want them to do and how to do it. The Richmond Experience has a great newsletter that packages up some of their best content, including their weekly insider. So Sam does a great job of writing a little teaser for the weekly insider and then uses this bold red button to say, hey, here's where you get the rest of the content. They've also added inline text links. So you can kind of see those red links in the middle of the paragraph. They're a different color and they're underlined, so I know that they're links. And then finally, Sam also links that image. So no matter where I am, there is an opportunity for me to take some type of action that Sam is encouraging. I also really love this email I got recently from Taza about their Mother's Day specials. The action they want from me is so obvious, and they've included all of the necessary information I need to take that action. It's telling me what times delivery are. It's telling me a cutoff. It's giving me a link. It's reminding me about Mother's Day. It's all right there, and it's super easy to digest. In addition to that, using that big, bold click to order header, they also have an additional button below that. And they've linked their logo. So everything here is linked. I don't have to work hard at all to find out how to get to Taza to make this order. And to double back on what I said last time about just sending ads and emails, I want to say that I feel like even though Taza is not necessarily offering me a discount code here, what they are doing is that they're using their timing really, really well. Everybody needs to get a Mother's Day something out there, or a lot of you do. I've certainly dropped the ball on ordering something ahead of time. So having some delivery options to order my family a great meal for Mother's Day is awesome. It is super valuable to me because of the time frame in which they're sending it. So even though I don't have a discount, I've got value. So there's kind of a balance there. Okay, so now we've got engaging content ideas and actionable goals. We are ready to dive into the fun part, which is design. You know this, but the look of your newsletter needs to be on brand. In this section, I'm going to walk you through my personal process for creating a great template to match your goals. Before we get started, creating a branded template in Mailchimp can be a little bit time consuming at first, but I really want to encourage you to invest the time in creating an awesome template, because that's the thing about a template. You'd only have to design it one time, right? And then you are set up. Every time you go to create a newsletter, you've got your amazing, flexible, engaging, actionable template, and you can use all of those decisions you've already made without having to think about them again. So to get started with that process, I would encourage you to begin by sketching out some layout ideas on paper. This is way easier than trying to figure out what you want once you're in the program. Decide on a general layout based on your goals and your content themes before hopping onto your computer. Next, you're going to go ahead and hop into Mailchimp to actually create that template. I'll walk you through the specifics in a moment, but you do this by going to the Brand tab, clicking Templates, and then there's a button called Create New Template. After you've got your template ready to go to work on, I want you to begin setting up your global styles before creating the layout. This means let's get into the color, the heading styles, the fonts, etc., before worrying a whole lot about the actual spacing of the different sections. Then, once we set up those, we can start to add in those content blocks. So you're going to directly pull from your ideas from your sketch and pull content blocks into the places based on what you've sketched. Finally, I would absolutely encourage you to do multiple rounds of testing to refine the design and then save that baby for all your future amazing newsletters. Now let's elaborate a little bit on how this happens and how this works. I wanted to show you guys an example of what it looks like to do a sketch. We're not talking crazy, super complicated stuff here. We're talking basic general blocking diagrams. Consider, as you're sketching, what content do you need to share? Is it visual? Does it require associated copy? How many things do you want to be included in your newsletter? Start drawing out different blocks and placing them together of different versions of how you could do this. Think of where your branding will go, where you'll put your images, and don't forget about your footer at the bottom. Look at lots of examples while you work on this. Spoiler alert, there are tons of examples already in your inbox. If you use the tab system in Gmail, just go to that promotions tab and you probably likely have hundreds of examples of newsletters. Think about the ones that you actually like opening and reading and consider the design and layout of those as you work on your sketch. Do a couple iterations and then pick a direction that you want to move forward with. Now it's time to create the actual template in Mailchimp. So you're going to go into your dashboard, and then number 1, you're going to find that brand tab at the top right. 2, in that drop down, it's going to give you a templates area. You're going to click that. After you get into the template section, over on the top right, number 3, you're going to click Create Template. Pretty obvious, but sometimes it just isn't quite as intuitive as we want it to be, right? After you click template, it's going to show you a page that looks like what's on the right here with the number 4. You can pick one of these sort of featured versions. I really like to use the basic section. I like to start from scratch and really have the most options possible to me. In this section, I always choose from the full width options. So you can choose between both. The full width option is sort of a newer option that Mailchimp has. And I figure, why not give yourself the most options available? You don't necessarily have to use the full width opportunity, but at least it's available to you if you want to use it later. And then pick the version of sort of content blocks based on your sketch. You can almost create any version of a newsletter from that one column template, with the one exception of 3 columns. If you have a really specific area that you really want to use 3 columns in your newsletter, you're going to need to utilize that 1 to 3 column version. But otherwise, with the blocks that they have in the drag and drop builder, you can basically create almost any other type of column setup with the 1 column version. We could really get into the weeds here, but I will just remind you guys of a tip that we talked about before. Less is more, right? Start with something simple and get familiar with the program, add your styles, make a version, send some newsletters, see how it goes. And then if you want to create something more complex later, you can, because you'll be a pro by then. All right, now we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty how-tos once we're into our editor. I want to first talk about setting up global styles. The easiest way to start this is thinking about your brand standards. We don't want to reinvent an entire style here. You want to use styles that your audience is already familiar and used to seeing associated with your brand. If you don't have a specific style guide, you might consider looking at your website for your style standards. You can mimic heading styles and color styles that you've already chosen for a place that you've previously designed. In a general note, I like to encourage keeping background colors universal and simple, meaning if you want to use a background color, I would suggest just using one color for the whole section or limiting it to maybe your header and footer. If you are going to use color, I would recommend, especially for background colors, that you go with something a little bit more simple and minimal. You want to think about, where do we want folks to focus their attention? We want them to read the content. We want them to click those buttons, right? So if we put too much stuff in other places, we're just distracting our audience. Take a note from your website here. Do you have a white background on your website? Why not just keep a white background on your email too, right? Just keep it simple. Okay. So now when we want to get into actually putting together some of the style settings for our newsletter, this is a personal trick of mine to help you when you're working out which styles are going to go where and to actually choose them. The default text box that Mailchimp will give you will just show one heading. And so it will have a heading in there that says something like, maybe add your heading here, right? I go into this and I add the copy. This is heading 1, this is heading 2, this is heading 3, heading 4, etc. And then I highlight each one of those and I actually apply the appropriate heading style to them. So when I look at this, I can see the example of all 4 of my heading styles. I like to also add an all caps version because sometimes I'll write headings in all caps. So this is what I do before I go in and set up any styles. This is still just like the default version, but this helps you once you go into the style area that you have sort of a live visual representation of what you're adjusting. So you're not just adjusting in a vacuum. After that, you just hit save at the bottom and that will take you back to your generic editing mode. Now it is time to dive into the design settings. This is going to take a little bit of time, probably the most time you're going to spend right here, but it really will be worth it. You're going to go into the style section of your editing mode. So kind of on the top right there, you can see there's sort of 2 main areas of editing your template. One is blocks, and that's the actual sort of content building blocks of the newsletter content. But then on the right side, there's a tab that says style. I want to encourage you to go through every single one of these sections and edit the styles for everything that's in there. I know that sounds like a lot, but really this is where the vast majority of your design decisions are going to be made. And what it does when you do it kind of in this universal style section, it will apply it globally to anything you create once you start adding in those blocks. So we make all the, kind of hard design decisions now here in the style section. Then when we go to create our blocks, all of those decisions have already been made, right? Having your brand styles close by, your typefaces and your color codes is really helpful when you go through this process. During each section, you will find kind of a new set of settings to adjust. The page section, that first one, is going to give you the general styles for basically the whole newsletter. So that's going to be background colors and heading styles. Then as you go under each one of those other sections, it's going to give you styles that are specific to that area of the newsletter. So like your pre-header is that tippy top part, header is where your logo goes, body is the middle section, and so on. I really want you to spend a lot of time tweaking all the settings in each one of these sections until they all have the same general styles, right? So we want to kind of pick a couple typefaces, just use those, make sure every section is using the same typefaces, colors, etc. If we're using one link style here, maybe we want to be consistent somewhere else. Quick note on fonts and typefaces. Because email really relies on the fonts that are local to a person's computer reading that email, Mailchimp only gives us a few options. I think it's maybe about 15 at this point. Just choose the font or typeface that is closest to your brand standards. I think we might use Helvetica or Open Sans, basically a really simple sans serif for most of our body. And then I think we might add in a monotype because that's a typeface that we use. When in doubt, keep it simple. Just pick one or two, and you can use color and size to differentiate your headings. Okay, now that you've got your background colors and your text styles and all of the settings of the global styles set up, you can begin to build your layout. This is a real example of a newsletter that Campfire designed for one of our clients, Kadima Leadership. I met with her and we talked through her goals, and then I drew a sketch of what I wanted it to look like. And then I began to add in global styles, thinking about the brand guide we had for her, in addition to the styles that are on her website. And then I started layering in the drag and drop blocks I needed to create my desired layout. You can toggle kind of at that top right. So we were in the style section before on the right tab. Now we're going to be in that block section on the left tab. You just grab whatever block you need, and then you're going to pull it into place. And Mailchimp will kind of let you know. It'll remind you. It'll see kind of like where we've got those boxes around the different area. It's reminding us, oh, this will be the header, this will be the body, etc. So you can pull those blocks into any of the different sections. Don't labor too much over your words or images. If you need to kind of add some placeholder images or placeholder text at this point to help get a visual for what things are going to look like, I would encourage you to do that. And don't worry too much about the specific text, right? Because once you go into actually creating an individual newsletter, that's when you'll really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what does this say and what image do I put there. But for now, I would encourage you to just use some placeholder images and copy that fits your needs to help figure out the layout and look. Once you've got your blocks in place, I want to encourage you to go beyond the default styling of each one of these blocks. Here I'm showing kind of this image and text block, right? And there are a number of different ways to style this type of block. You can see on the right-hand side, again, we're kind of showing how Mailchimp is using these tabs always on the right-hand side at the top. So it can be kind of a good thing to remind you, this is sort of where Mailchimp is going to show you, these are the options available with this particular thing. So for this block, it's giving me content, style, and settings. Go through each one of those areas and click to see what other options you have. I could probably swap my image to be on the right side. I think I could probably put my text below the image, etc. There's a lot of different ways we could do this. And so I've styled mine specifically to have my image on the left and my copy on the right. Additionally, each time you add an image, you have editing and linking capabilities. For this image, I use the edit setting to crop it into a circle. It took me 5 seconds and boom, it's instantly more customized than it was with the default. Finally, you can fill in your content under the content tab there and then use all those text editing features to add in your heading styles and body styles that you previously set up. This is going to add hierarchy to the section, make it easier to skim, etc. Finally, once you start to see these blocks come together with placeholder copy and your heading styles, you might realize that maybe some of your heading styles or global settings maybe aren't working exactly the way you were hoping. So this is really kind of a process of pulling things together, refining it, adding some things, refining it. It's not going to be a perfect fit the first time you do it. I would encourage you to set up as many global styles as you can before adding this content and these copy blocks in here. But after you add the blocks, go back to your style settings and say, does all of this look all right? Do I need to change this? Is that heading too small, etc.? Okay. Now it is time to preview and test your email. At the top right, there's always this preview and test button, and you can use the preview button for kind of a quick peek at what does this look like without all the edit mode features on. And then you can also use that test email button to send yourself a test to really see what it looks like once it's in your inbox. There are always a couple of things, whether it's like spacing or sizing, you just really get a much better idea of what it's going to look like once you actually see it with all that email stuff and inbox things around your email. Lastly, Mailchimp does a good job of auto-saving, but hitting that save and exit button will give you a chance to title your template. A lot of times I date my template with a year to help me remember which is the most currently updated one. I redesign ours every few years, so that's helpful to me particularly, but maybe for you, the name is more related to the audience or the content you plan to use this particular template for. Okay, to recap, set some goals, make that newsletter engaging, make it actionable, and make it on brand. And finally, don't forget to test it. Before we dive into Q&A, I wanted to quickly share some bonus tips that I use when I'm designing Mailchimp newsletters. Good white space is really kind of a pet peeve of mine, and Mailchimp sometimes makes it hard to figure out how to add spacing between different sections of content. So my hack for this is I use the divider block. On the left-hand side, you can kind of see a screenshot of that. It just looks like the line, right? It's pretty obvious. Lots of people put lines to divide things. But what I actually want is just a clear, empty area. So what you can do is you can change the weight of that line to just none. And now it's just an empty padding block that allows me to put a little bit more space between my sections. You can use that padding area to adjust the pixel number, which will adjust the height of the actual block. You can duplicate them, use them around. This is a tip I use all the time when I'm doing Mailchimp newsletters. Another pro tip is to add a few different example buttons into your template. You can drop these anywhere as they're just pieces for you to use if you need them when you're actually going to create that week's newsletter. You can just delete them if you don't end up using them or duplicating them if you need more. But for some reason, button styles are not actually part of your global style settings within Mailchimp, which is very silly to me, but what are you going to do? You have to actually add a button block in order to start setting up the styles. So add a couple of those and save them in your templates. You can easily grab them and use them without having to style one every time you make a newsletter, right? We just want to see how many decisions we can make ahead of time so that when you actually go to write and create the newsletter, all those design decisions have already been made and you don't have to worry about it. Finally, don't forget about your footer, right? This is a great place at the end of your email to remind your audience, if they've made it all the way to the end, that you've got awesome social media links, you've got a great website you would love them to check out, any other kind of important information that you want your audience to know. Your footer is a great place to put this. Also, you do not have to keep all of that crazy template Mailchimp text that they give you at the bottom that says like your address and where it came from and, you know, why you're on this newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. Like those are all, that's sort of in the template and you can delete all of that. And then you can add whatever version of that you want back in your own brand voice and your own brand language. I will encourage you to include a unsubscribe option. I think not including one is a little unethical, but what you can do is you can write it in your own voice and you can style it however you want. That merge tags button that I'm highlighting on the right there in red is where you'll find links to add that unsubscribe feature. Okay, guys, I'm 5 minutes over. I apologize, but we went through a lot today and I would love to know what questions you guys have. I'm gonna see if I can pull Lauren back up on here and she can help us talk through any questions. Hi.
Hey. All right. So we got one question from Rebecca.
Fabulous.
In the middle. And she asked if you recommend upgrading to have access to more templates.
Yeah, Mailchimp has made it hard lately because for so long it was free and that was incredible. And honestly, we're getting to that point where we're right at like 199, emails, or 1,999 emails, because at 2,000 you have to start paying. So I think it depends on your goals. I think hopefully, I would say we have encouraged a fair amount of our clients to just go ahead and upgrade so that they can have access to all of the features. Depending on how many newsletters you send and how often you use the program would probably be a good, helpful indication of if that, I think it's $15 a month around there, if that subscription is worth it to you. So, I mean, if you're only sending 5 emails a year, it might not be worth that. But if you're sending 1 a month, that might be worth it to have the extra features and the added capabilities of the paid account.
Cool. Let's see. We just got another one from Tiffany here. Do you have a recommended amount of email cadence, regular, weekly sends, random?
I definitely think I would start with some level of regularity. So start small, start with what works with your bandwidth, right? So Campfire doesn't send a ton of emails because we put a lot of effort into our social media and some of the other channels that we use, but I do still send out one, definitely send one a quarter. And then I will occasionally send them in between that time frame if I have something special to promote. So when we first decided to do this workshop series, I think I had sent something out less than a quarter previous to that, and I sent out a special one anyways to promote this. I think it really depends on your goals, like what you're trying to get out of it. If your newsletter is really just kind of like a helpful set of tools and you're creating content on a pretty regular schedule, maybe you do like a monthly roundup. I think a lot of organizations send on a monthly schedule, and I think that's nice. It doesn't overwhelm me. When people are starting to send me things multiple times a month, I personally get a little ruthless with my unsubscribe if it's not super valuable content, right? So if you're sending me something that I'm getting something out of every time I read it, I'm excited. But I mean, places like, I don't know, I feel like West Elm is like a terrible one where they just, I think they've sent me like 4 emails and in like 1 week before. And it's just like, that's too much. Like nobody can handle that kind of content, right? So if you think too about your audience a little bit, what is their bandwidth for reading emails, right? And how much time does it take you to put into it, and kind of find a nice balance there of, I want to provide value and I want to stay in touch with people, and here's the amount of time I have to give to that, and here's what I would like to ask from my audience. Yeah.
Great. We just had one more question that was about previous workshops. So I just put a link in the chat here. So if anyone missed out on any of our 3 other mini workshops, you can catch them at our YouTube channel. I just put a link in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll do this one on there as well. And I'll just like click over to our last slide here. You can contact us at our contact page on our website, follow us on social. And if you guys run into any problems with Mailchimp and you just want to reach out and ask a question, please do. Or if you're looking to design a custom template for your brand, we would love to help out. So please reach out. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Oh, we just got one more question
great.
From Alexandra. If our newsletter is geared towards converting sales, is it a good idea to pair both content with value along with that push for sales? Or will it be too overwhelming?
No, I honestly think, I feel like your newsletters should have some level of value every time you send them, right? And so some of that could be that you're just sharing a new product, sharing an idea, sharing a promo code or something. But, especially for product-based businesses, one of the things that I feel like is valuable is whatever your product is that you're pushing people to, what are their tips or ideas or thoughts about how somebody might use that product or who that product is good for, right? Or like we thought about with Taza, there was like a timing element that was valuable to it. So pushing sales can also be making sure that people are being reminded of when they need to buy something. So I think that it's absolutely important to have both, because your audience will learn that if there's no value in the email other than being advertised to, they'll stop opening it, right? And there are some brands that's an exception. If you have a really, really loyal audience that adores your brand and really wants to see the content and is excited to shop for it, then I think you can break some of those rules. But if you're someone who's still trying to grow and encourage people to get into it and remind them that they're interested, then I think making sure that at least 50% of your emails have some level of valuable content. I'm just thinking, like, if it's a wearable product, like, here are examples of how to wear it, or here's an interview with someone who loves it, or anything like that, I think starts to provide just a second layer of more than just, I would like you to purchase from me, but here's why, and here's how, and here are the benefits, etc. I hope that answers your question.
Great. We got one more question coming from Taylor. And they ask, what are common examples for A/B testing with newsletters?
Oh, gosh. I think this really depends on how well you know your audience and how much effort you want to put into kind of segmenting them. So I think, figuring out Subject lines is a big one that people like to use A/B testing for. I feel like in the past, we've sort of more focused on what is the value we want to provide and what is the content we're excited to share than doing a ton of testing. I'm going to be totally honest, I'm not an expert in the analytics behind this. So I will say it depends a lot on your goals, right? So if you have like some really different types of buyers, then you might start to think about, okay, this particular buyer is really concerned about this aspect of what I provide, and this buyer is more concerned about this aspect. Maybe you might style the copy that you write a little bit different, or the ask or that kind of action button to be different, and send it to those two audiences, kind of see how they react. I'm sorry if that's not a super detailed question or answer.
Cool. Alrighty, I think that's all the questions for today. So we just want to thank you guys so much for joining us. And again, there's a link to our YouTube channel to watch the recaps up in the chat. Anything else, Christy?
Yeah, no, just want to say thank you guys. We've really enjoyed doing this workshop and bringing this to you all. And so thank you for joining us and participating. It's been great. I'll probably send out a survey email just to get your feedback. We'd love to know more about what you guys want to learn about and how we could bring that content your way. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, guys.